Welcome to Loup TV. I'm Gene along with Doug for Happy St. Patrick's Day, the 17th of March. Our four topics today are Amazon closes the MGM deal. Second is cryptocurrencies become legal in Ukraine. Third is we're going to discuss the merits of NASA getting into space in a big way. And lastly, a traditional bank getting into a non-traditional real estate class, that being the Metaverse. And we'll take it to the top. This is grabbing most of the headlines today. A little bit of a non-event, a little bit of an event. It is official. MGM and Amazon have come together. If you're curious, that the timing of this deal from when it was announced last year to when it actually closed has been pretty typical. It's been about 9 months versus other deals this size. And I'd like, Doug, your take on what does it mean, if anything?
I think the structure of how the deal was finalized, let's say, I'm not going to say approved, I'm going to say finalized, is important because we talked about this, I think, a week ago. Amazon had previously basically submitted all of the information that the FTC had previously requested about the transaction. And the structure of the law, by doing that, kind of created a shot clock for the FTC to decide, are they going to move to block the transaction or are they going to let it pass?
So they basically forced their hand.
That's right. And as I understand the news, as I've read it, I don't believe the FTC has necessarily said, we are okay with this, but the shot clock has expired. And so Amazon, per the law, is free to move ahead with the transaction. And I think that's important because we've thought about this deal as maybe being an indication of how aggressive the government might be to big tech in other big transactions.
I have.
And yeah, and I think that this says, the government didn't give it its tacit approval, but Amazon found a way to push the deal through. And I believe that the FTC can still challenge it if they decide to in the future. But I think that becomes a lot more difficult now that shot clock that we've talked about has expired.
Presumably the FTC would have known about the shot clock. And if they did not want the deal to happen, why didn't they just move faster? It's kind of a fumble on their part if they really didn't want this to happen and then let it go through on a technicality.
If they didn't want it to happen, or if they felt they really had a case, then I would agree with you. But the reality is, and I think you have to think about this in probabilities, I think it was a high probability, now that we know the deal has been finalized and the shot clock expired, the high probability is probably that the FTC didn't feel like they had a good enough case to challenge it. And so they just let it run out rather than give it approval. And that may be saying something too.
I think that does say something.
Approving, right. They can still say, hey, we never said this was okay, rather than giving it approval.
Oh, my read was it's just hard to challenge these. Even if they don't feel great about it, it's hard to build a case against them.
I think that's true. And I think that will continue to be true with some of these other ones. I mean, Activision and Microsoft is the next big one up. I think at this point, it's the biggest of the ones up next. So, we'll see how that one goes. But I think you're right. It should be challenging. Like I think if you are really trying to put the interests of the consumer first, I think the government should have to make a strong case that any of these mergers is really going to make the consumer worse off. And for this deal, I just don't see how that's true. You've got millions.
We don't see how it's true that they're worse, that the consumer is worse off.
The consumer is worse off. That's right.
I got you. Yeah. So
Amazon services are going to get better here, and millions and millions and millions of Americans use Amazon services. They're probably not going to pay more for the content that they get. So I think that's good for the consumer.
Activision users and Microsoft users going to be better off for that combination?
I think net they will, because if you subscribe to Xbox Game Pass, you're probably going to have a lot more incredible content on Game Pass. And if you're a PlayStation user, Microsoft has already said they're not going to make Activision content exclusive. So there's no change to the PlayStation user.
Got it. I'll take the final word on this. Is I still believe that we're going to see a quickening of M&A activity in the next 6 to 12 months from some of these large companies. This to me was a sign that it's hard to block these transactions. And I would caution too, that doesn't mean that every company that's down 30, 40, 50% is in play here. This was, call it an $8 billion transaction. And I think that the real sweet spot of where this M&A is going to come from is probably in the $1 to $5 billion, $1 to $3 billion range, somewhere in there. Our second topic comes from Ukraine, where virtual assets are now a regulated asset class. What does that mean?
I think that it's mostly a sign of how much crypto has actually come into Ukraine over the past month since the war with Russia started. And it's been over $100 million, last story I saw, of crypto assets have come into Ukraine to support the country. And so to me, I think they're just basically saying, we are a pro-crypto country. Certain countries have said we're anti-crypto, China being the most notable, and other countries have sort of made a statement and put a stake in the ground saying that we believe in crypto and we kind of believe in digital assets by and large. And I think Ukraine is really embracing that with this policy here. It just gives them regulatory oversight over the industry.
And so there's probably some tax factors that go into that too. But even before what's happened over the last couple months is that Ukraine has wanted to be the crypto capital of the world. And so I guess one step in that direction. We will shift to space, an organization that you probably haven't heard much. I haven't heard a lot from lately, which is NASA. I feel like that SpaceX has grabbed a lot of the attention, but they've been at work and they do cooperative work with SpaceX, and they're going to be launching a rocket. It's the first of a family of rockets. It's been on the drafting boards for the last 12 years. It's the SLS family. SLS stands for Space Launch Systems. What's unique about this is that it's a large rocket. We compare that to the Heavy Falcon, which is considered kind of the big rocket out there. That being, of course, SpaceX's. The first in the series of SLS, the one that's going today, is going to be about 40% taller. We're not looking at total weight here or lifting pounds, but call it 40% taller than the Heavy Falcon. And then if you go all the way up to the anticipated largest one, I don't know when that one's going to launch, the largest SLS, it's going to be about 70% bigger. So these are big rockets. They're ultimately made for humans. There are going to be no humans on the initial flight, but it is for deep space exploration. When we talk about that, of course, we think about Mars, which brings me finally to my question is, why do we care about Mars? Is this beyond just Elon Musk having an obsession about it? Really from a business standpoint, is it something that we should be paying attention to, or is it just inspiring that humanity is pushing towards a frontier, and it's just important that we have that kind of that tip of the spear just to be human and feel good about the world?
It's both to me. I mean, if you go back to sort of the original space race, ironically, Cold War times, several decades ago, I think that it was something that America united around, and it meant something. It was exploration, and it was pushing frontiers, and that was sort of what I think America stood for. And so I do think it matters, just from as soft as that might be, from just a sort of what it means.
Timely launch. I didn't realize that.
That's right. Yeah. And sort of like put a stake in the ground that we are explorers as humans. And I do think there is a truth to the reality of being an interplanetary species. I think there is importance to that. But space, I actually think there's many other opportunities before we get to Mars that I think are relevant. Obviously, we've seen SpaceX with satellite bringing internet to sort of uncovered parts of the world in many cases. And I think that we'll see things like space mining for metals. Metals are going to continue to be an incredibly important thing for our digitally connected world. We rely on metals very much. We rely on metals for electric cars. And I also think there's unique things that you can do in space. There's some companies that are experimenting with manufacturing in low or no gravity situations, which sort of changes just the entire physical nature of building things. And there's potential, I think, for us to be able to build things in space that we actually can't build in Earth where gravity restricts us from doing certain things. So there's all kinds of cool things that are starting to happen. It's going to take time. I always think we warn with that, but I think there's a lot of opportunities in space that will present themselves before we get to Mars.
Do you, when Neil Armstrong and the crew did, I guess Sullivan and Buzz Aldrin, I think, when they did a tour, kind of a global tour after they got back from the original landing, and I read commentary from Neil Armstrong. He talked about just this unifying, this globe unified, how people all over the world were just so happy about the accomplishment. It was U.S. versus the Soviet Union. That was a kind of a sub. I'm sure at the time the Soviets were not happy about that, but everyone else was kind of happy about it. And when we think fast forward to when we get to Mars, do you think it will kind of largely unify the planet, or do you think it will just be so in our buried in our tribalisms that we won't have that same kind of bonding moment?
Maybe for a temporary moment, but my guess is that it wouldn't be a permanent unification. I don't think anything's ever a permanent unification. We've talked about this before with politics. I mean, there's nothing that really should permanently unite any significantly large enough group of people, because we all have individualities and different ways that we see the world. And so diversity, I mean, that's diversity, right? Diversity matters. And even if there are certain things that we might agree are incredible, like reaching Mars, I don't necessarily know that would smooth over every other bridge that we maybe don't share together.
Great. Final topic brings us to the Metaverse. HSBC, the bank, has purchased or is doing a partnership with Sandbox. They have a virtual, correct me here, Doug, kind of a virtual world, and they're HSB is essentially partnering to get space, to purchase space within this Metaverse world. It's notable because it's the first kind of large traditional bank to make such a move. And my question is, do you think we're going to see other banks start to follow suit, or do you feel that when it comes to the Metaverse, it really is about a crypto first world and that need not apply traditional banking world?
We will see other banks, and we already have a Visa, not a bank, but a financial services provider. And they've already sort of made a statement. They bought a CryptoPunk last year. And so they've kind of said, we think that digital assets are real and meaningful, and that's going to be a part of our future. So I do suspect we'll see other banks, other financial organizations, even ones that don't necessarily offer crypto products right now, dip into the space over time. I think it's a long tailwind that will continue to support the industry.
Going to be a lot of fun. Doug, do you own any real estate in the Metaverse? For full disclosure.
It depends on how you define real estate. Maybe is my answer.
Okay. I have an answer. No, I do not. No disclosure. No need for any disclosures in this episode of Loup TV. There will be disclosures in future episodes. On behalf of Doug, Gene, and Loup TV, bye for now.